Today we're going to talk about candy boards. Candy boards are a winter tool. You've watched my last two videos. Talked a lot about candy boards, talked about how I get through the winter. I like candy boards. And what are candy boards? They're basically sugar food for bees, usually toward the end of winter for me, to just supplement if they need a little bit more feed. It's insurance, and there's nothing wrong with a little bit of insurance. Before we get really into the process of making the sugar, I want to talk about the two different ways that you can make candy boards. Actually, there's probably several, but the two main ways that people make candy boards is by either the cook or the no-cook method. I only do no-cook, and the reason I do that is for two reasons. One, the no-cook way is very, very simple and uses two ingredients. Or the other is the cook method, which requires heating sugar and water up to 240 degrees. You're putting some other additives, some vinegar and some other stuff into it, and it can cause hydroxymethylfurfural. I might be pronouncing that correctly or incorrectly, but it's commonly referred to as HMF. And HMF is a chemical that develops when sugar is heated to high temperatures. Is there enough in it to hurt bees? It is toxic to bees. Is there enough? I don't know that I've ever heard anybody losing a hive because they had too much HMF in their candy boards. The thing that bothers me the most is that is hot, 240 degrees. I did it for a couple of years and I started to realize this is really dangerous and it's hard on everything. The candy does turn hard, but so does this method. So this is the method we're going to use. There are cooked candy recipes out there all over the place. You can go out and hunt one down if you want to do that. Today, we're going to go with the no-cook method. But before we go to the no-cook method, we're going to first send you downstairs to Dave, who is in the shop, and Dave's going to show you how to make candy boards if you're looking for the ability to build these yourself, because they're pretty simple. I'll let Dave explain. Here you go, Dave. Thanks, Dave, and I hope everything's going well in the kitchen. Things are going great down here in the shop. Busy, busy, busy building quilt boxes and candy boards because we've got winter coming up and I got to make things happen. Dave wanted me to show you what a candy board box looks like, so here you go. Okay, back to you, Dave.
Oh, for God's sake, show them more than just the box. Show them how it's made.
Oh, you do want more? Okay, we'll do that. Always more. What's with the guy? Okay, so it's basically just a box, right? Okay, I've used a 1x2 on these. That's really all you need because you don't have a whole lot of candy going into these. If you filled this up with sugar, you're probably talking 25 pounds. So this is like way more than you need. You could probably use just a butt joint on this where you just put the two boards together and nail them together, kind of like if you watched our quilt box video. I just used a butt joint. On these, it's a lap joint. I don't know if you can see that. It's just a simple lap joint. It just makes it a little bit firmer for me. Just kind of like that. You can do whatever you want. I then have a screen that keeps the sugar in, and I put a board down the middle and I put a shimmer on the outside because you don't want it sitting directly on the bees. You need to get a little bit of space. It looks to be about a 1/4 inch shimmer on the edge, and I put the board in the middle to keep the screen from sagging. A lot of times if you buy these at the store, they may not have the screen in the middle. I like it, just gives me a little bit more support. I'm using 1/2 inch screen. 1/2 inch screen on this is preferred by me because it gives the bees more space to get through. If you buy in the store, you're going to get the much smaller screen, and we're probably talking 1/8 inch, and that's pretty small for the bees to squeeze through. I feel like those tend to tear up bees' wings a little bit. I don't know it for a fact, but they're using these just before they're going out and starting to do some foraging. So later in the winter, and I want every bee that possibly can fly to get out there and fly. So I've gotten away from these, but again, they're perfectly fine if you buy them in the store. Okay, the other thing that is not happening on this is this particular box has no ventilation holes in it. If you go back to my two previous videos, I talk a lot about the fact that I use condensing hives, so I'm not looking for ventilation. If you buy these either online or in the store, more than likely, you're going to get a ventilation hole. And it's just, what's that, probably a 1/2 inch hole, maybe 3/4. And it's got a piece of screen on the inside of it here, just to keep things in, keep things out, but it gives you enough ventilation. So if that's what you're doing, if you're making them at home, I would highly suggest you put in a vent if you want your hives ventilated. Otherwise, not much to it, but it is effective. So back to you, Dave. Well, Dave, thanks for that. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. So let's talk about how we do this. It's a simple process. I use 8 pounds of sugar in my candy boards. Some people will use, I've seen up to 14 or 15. I'm sure you could even go 20. These will probably hold that. It's just a lot of sugar. The most common seems to be somewhere around 10 pounds, 10 to 14. I use 8 pounds. And the reason I use 8 pounds is because I'm using condensing hives, and the bees don't go through as much food, and I don't need to put that much sugar into these, and it's also an expense. Plus, you got the opportunity to check these throughout the winter. So if one's going low, switch it out with another candy board. It's a pretty simple process. I always have 2 or 3 extras each year that if I need to put a candy board on, I do. One thing real quick that I do want to talk about, and I think Dave might have mentioned it downstairs, we use a 1/2 inch garden wire on the bottom of this because I feel like it's easier on the bees. The ones you get in the store are 1/8 inch. Those are okay, but I feel like it's really tight for the bees to get through, especially if you're talking about new bees in the spring. You don't want their wings getting torn up because then they can't fly, or they can't fly as long, or it's more stressful on them. So I use this, it's just a little bit bigger, but you've got to pull these out of the hive as soon as you think they don't need supplemental feed. And I'll tell you the reason why. Well, no, I'll show you the reason why. Because if you leave them on too long, this is what you get. I left this on way too long, and they'd eaten almost all the sugar out of this, and it's like, oh look, there's space that we could build more comb. So obviously they built more comb, and this might be pretty small for you to see. I'll get you a little bit closer. Any seasoned beekeepers out there are going to be able to tell you, and I'm just going to tell you flat out, this is all drone comb. What that means is that as soon as they finish building this, the queen, who's big enough to get through here, came up and filled this with drone comb. What a mess, okay? A lot of extra work, a lot of work I couldn't leave in the hive because I knew they were going to completely keep filling this. It was going to be a mess. Anyway, so don't leave them in too long, but I do like the idea that I'm not hurting the bees. Just there's a little bit more caution on my side. So how do we mix the sugar? This system is really super simple. As I said, if I use 8 pounds of sugar, you want to use 1 tablespoon of water to 1 pound of sugar. So I'm going to pour out 8 pounds of sugar. I'm going to put a 1/2 cup of water, because that's 8 tablespoons, and mix it. I use my KitchenAid mixer, my stand mixer. You can use a handheld mixer to mix it. You can use a spoon. It just takes a little bit longer. There's going to be a little bit more effort, but just all you really want to do is mix it. You're going to mix it so it's really almost the consistency of wet sand, and it's packable. So that's where we're gonna go with it. So let's fill this up, get that going, and show you then how we pack these things in. And because my mixing bowl isn't big enough, I have to do this in 2 4-pound batches. So let's pour in 4 pounds of sugar here. And that makes 4 pounds and a little snack for extra. There we go. And we're gonna put it in the mixer. Just put it on stir and slowly pour in the water. And then basically sit back until it's done. It does not take a whole lot of time. You can hear it starting to slow down a little bit. And here's how I check it. It feels soft. It packs down. So that's what we're looking for. I'm going to leave this for just a second more. And we should be good to go. Now that that's done, it's time to pour the first batch into the candy board. The issue is that you've got this board in the middle. If I just poured it in, all the sugar would come out the bottom. So I have cut 2 pieces of cardboard a long time ago, and I just hang on to these year after year after year. And see, it even says candy board on it. So I don't just think it's a piece of cardboard and I toss it away. And these go on, and then I've got a flat surface into which to pour my sugar. So lift up the head of this, get as much of the sugar off as you can, because then it's all over the counter, and that makes Mom really unhappy, but that's part of the life of being a sticky beekeeper. And then This simply just goes in the middle, okay? And then I have to repeat the process. I want to get everything out of here so my weight is still correct. And then I just repeat the process with another 4 pounds. So here we go with that. Okay. And 4 pounds. There you go. A quarter cup of water onto the mixer and repeat the process. Now that that's complete, pull this out and we've got our 8 pounds. I think I've got a spatula here. And so you can see what's going on. I'm going to move the mixer out of the way. Don't need the scale anymore. Now the fun part, we get to play with it. So I want to add something. Downstairs, Dave was talking about the fact that if you are not using condensing hives and you want ventilation, there's a vent hole in these. To open that hole up so that you've got enough air to be able to come through, I take, or you can take, a small wooden block and place it in front of where that hole is at, and then you pack your sugar around it. And then when things dry, you carefully lift the block out, and then you've got the hole there. I don't need to do that. I need a solid and want a solid because sugar will soak up moisture as well. So I didn't add that at the beginning. The fact that sugar will soak up moisture. So when you've got this on your hive, you not only have insulation, but you also have the ability to wick moisture, or in my case, push moisture down to the edges. So here's how we basically do that. I just take this board and push the sugar as evenly as possible into every corner. And there is kind of a fun zen to this, I'm telling you. And you just want to get it as even as you possibly can. And 8 pounds of sugar will fill this up about a third of the way, maybe to a half after I get it all in here. And I want to pack it into the corners and get it as even as possible. And then I have this board, which I actually cut to be able to use to flatten these out. And I just drag it across a couple times just to fill in the holes a little bit. Probably a little more OCD than I need to be, but you're going to see in a second why it's kind of important to have it as flat as possible. So there, I'm pretty flat, looking pretty good. And then I take the board and I press it down. Or my wife, who's from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, would say, you pank it down. So for her, I'm going to pank it. I'd be curious in the comments, do you pat it down or do you pank it? What's your preferred method? And I get it flat. And then you can set it aside overnight. I just set them aside until I need them because I don't need them for quite a while, and they'll dry hard as a rock. You can mix in probably a half a teaspoon of Hive Alive, just give them a little bit more supplement. And also something that you can do is put a pollen patty in. If you wanted to, you could, on the top of this, put a winter patty. I don't normally put a pollen patty on initially, but I do put a pollen patty or part of a pollen patty on usually about the time I see them start to break through the sugar. I put about a third of a pollen patty on. And why do I only put a third on? Well, I'll keep replacing it, but hive beetles love pollen patties. So I'm not really hep on having too much in there that the bees don't eat quickly, because I don't want hive beetles laying eggs in the pollen patty, because I've had it happen early on, not knowing really what to do and not having the advice of not putting full pollen patties on, and it was a mess. I had to really struggle to keep that hive going that year. And my preference for pollen patties, I've had really good success with global patties. In the spring, I put 4% on, and that seems to do exactly what I want. It helps build up the brood, helps build up the hive, makes them happy, makes them healthy. So that's candy boards. So appreciate you stopping in. If you haven't, please subscribe. That means a lot. It helps us keep doing what we're trying to do in educating beekeepers, especially new beekeepers. And it's much appreciated. And that like button helps too. So happy candying, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.